Thank you for watching this video. Today we're going to show you how to use one of these little GL.INET, in this case 300M, but it should work on any of their models, to take your Roku or your Firestick on the road with you so that you can watch all your TV anywhere you go. I have confirmed that it does actually work on the version 1, but you have to upgrade to the beta version 3 firmware. I hope you enjoy. Be sure to like and subscribe, and if you have any questions after watching the video, leave me a comment and I'll try to answer as best I can. This is a diagram of what we're going to create today. We're going to put a Raspberry Pi in the house, and it's going to run a product called Pi VPN. We're going to be able to use that to create a VPN connection to a GL.INET router. That GL.INET router can be anywhere in the world. That will then rebroadcast your home network so that your Fire TV or your Roku or whatever will think it's at home. So the Fire TV connects to the wireless that's presented by the GL.INET, looks like your home wireless. It then attaches to the remote wireless connection, for example, the guest network at a hotel or at a friend's house, sends the data over that to the Raspberry Pi in your house, which then goes out to the internet. It's very simple in concept. So let's get started. Let's set up Pi VPN and a GL.INET router. Today we're going to cover how to set up a Raspberry Pi. We're going to show you how to set up Pi VPN on the Raspberry Pi. We'll create a Wireguard profile and later an Openvpn profile. We'll show you how to set up the GL.INET router and set up your SSID so your Firestick and other devices will work. First thing you need to do is to get the Raspberry Pi imager. Once you run it, we'll ask you a couple of questions. You'll want to install the Raspberry Pi OS, the 32-bit version. Have your SD card in the machine. Select the SD card and tell it to write. Tells you it's going to delete everything, so yes, that's what you want to do. Let it run for a few seconds. In this case, obviously time-lapsed. It takes probably 10 or 15 minutes the first time I did it, and it writes and verifies it. You can remove the SD card and we'll continue the setup. After it's finished, pull the card out, put it back in, and go to the boot partition on that card. What you want to do is, once you find that boot partition, right-click someplace. In this case, you do New, and we're doing a text document. Sorry, you can't see it under the logo here. And you want to call it SSH. Notice it has text at the end. You want to delete that, so it's just SSH with no extension. Yes, you want to change the file name. What this does is allow you to remotely SSH into the device when it starts. Once the Raspberry Pi is set up and powered on, you need to find it on your network, and let's do some configuration. We're using the raspi config command, and the first thing we're going to do here is change the password for the default Pi user. We use this for a lot of things, so that password needs to be set to something far more secure. You just select that option, enter the password, confirm the password, and it is changed. Okay, let's do a couple of other little things here. Let's change some localization options. We want to change our locale. Since we're in the United States, we're going to change it to ENUS UTF-8. You may want to go back here and change your time zone if you're in a different time zone, but I'm not doing that in this video. So you go down and you find ENUS, and the one you want to select is the UTF-8. That's the default that you should be using here. So you select it, you hit OK. It'll ask you what you want to be the default, and you will select the UTF-8 version again. You can see you go down and you select the ENUS UTF-8 as the default, and it does take a couple of seconds to complete the regeneration here. So we'll give it a second. Then we'll go ahead and exit out of here, and and we need to do a couple of things. We want to do an update and then an upgrade. The update just gets the package information. If you think of it like a Windows update, the update actually just checks for the update, but the upgrade will actually apply those updates. So we'll go ahead and exit out of here, and I do a DF just to check to make sure that the file system is the size that I expect it to be, and it is. So let's go ahead and do that update. The -Y means don't ask me any questions, just go ahead and complete the task. It takes a few seconds. The next step, the upgrade, takes a good bit of time, but this one's fairly quick. That was in real time. The next one will be time-lapsed for you. So let's go ahead and do the upgrade. And you'll see it zips through here, and I actually cut some of this out because it took quite a while. It may take, if it's been a while, may take 15 minutes or more for this to complete, but we won't make you wait that long just to watch. See, it zips through. This is obviously very sped up. And the next thing we'll need to do is reboot once it's complete. That lets all the changes that we've just added to be applied to the file system. Like I said, we'll reboot here. We give the Raspberry Pi a minute to reboot, and now we get to do the fun part. Log back in using the password that you created a few minutes ago, and we will run the command to start installing Pi VPN. This also takes a little while, so this is obviously time-lapsed, but it'll walk you through all the process that you need. So let's let it install. Installation is complete. Let's go ahead and get this thing set up. The first thing it's going to ask you about is a static versus DHCP reservation. You can do it either way. I do the DHCP reservation just because I can manage it all in one place on the actual router. I recommend that, but you can do it however you feel the most comfortable. So here you can see I'm selecting that I'm going to keep that DHCP reservation. The next step is to select a local user. Since we just set this Pi up, there's one user only. It's the default Pi, so we'll select that. Next, we're going to select Wireguard versus Openvpn. We'll show you Openvpn at the end, but Wireguard is what I recommend. It seems to be a little bit quicker, but you may want to use Openvpn if you have other specific needs. Okay, let's let it finish installing, and it's going to ask us a couple of configuration questions. The very first configuration question that's going to ask us is about the default port. I recommend you keep the default port, and remember you have to open that up on your router so that it can pass traffic to this port on both TCP/IP and UDP. Remember to do that. Next, it asks you for a default DNS provider. I didn't know anything about the differences here, so I selected the default. I also recommend you use a product like OpenDNS so that you can use an outside DNS service and you can actually select that and not have to try to keep track of your external IP in case it changed. Since this is open to the internet, I do recommend strongly that you enable the auto updating. So yes, you want to select that. The install is actually finished now. To continue using it, you need to create a couple of profiles. These profiles are used by individual devices, and you don't want to share these profiles. You want to put one per device. That way, if you lose a device, you can revoke that profile. You do this using the Pi VPN add command. That's how you create one of them. So let's go ahead and reboot and get ready to do that. Okay, let's log back in and create some client profiles. You'll do that using the Pi VPN command, specifically Pi VPN add. It'll ask you for a name. We're going to call this client profile GL.INET-test. You want to create a different profile for every user or device that you connect to the VPN. You'll see it creates a subfolder called configs, and the file is created in there. Now we need to figure out some way to get that file off of the Raspberry Pi and onto the Windows machine where we can work with it. Fortunately, Windows 10 makes this easy. You go into your settings, then into apps, apps and features, optional features, add a feature, and you type in OpenSSH. The OpenSSH client will install the command that we're going to use to download the files from the Raspberry Pi. Once the installation is complete, we need to open up a Windows command line. Create a folder someplace where you can store these configuration files. I'm using temp VPN. And then we're going to use the scp command, which was just installed with the OpenSSH package. Let's go over that command a little bit. SCP is the command. That means secure copy. Pi is the user. Remember we said use the default user Pi at the IP address of the Raspberry Pi, configs. Remember it was stored in the configs directory, a / because Unix uses a / and then the name of the file, GL.INET-test.com. Don't forget there's a period at the very end. Type in the password and it downloads the file for you. Now that file is on your Windows machine and the hard part is finished. All right, let's set up your router. The first thing we need to do is select English and put in a new password. You may have already done this if you've played with the router beforehand, but this is starting it over from scratch. The very first thing we're going to do is set up the wireless connection. This is an important step. You need to set the wireless to the same network name and password as your home wireless network, because you're going to trick your Firestick into thinking it's at home. So what you do is you go into wireless, you select modify, put in the name of your home wireless network, and then set the password, the Wi-Fi key, as the same as your home network. This way, when you're running this device, your Firestick or your Roku or whatever will actually think it's at home and just automatically connect. Okay, the next thing we need to do is to set up the VPN client. So go down to VPN, select Wireguard client, add a new profile. Let's give it a name. We'll just call it a test client. And we go over and open up Notepad and open up the configuration file that we just downloaded in the previous step. When you open that up, you'll copy it to the clipboard and you will paste it into the field on the router. So just edit, copy, switch back over to your router window and just paste it right in. And you can't connect now because you haven't done the internet connection. So the last step is you go to Internet. You want to set up the repeater option. This is a step that you'll have to do every time when you go to a new location. If you're in a hotel, this is where you connect it to the wireless in the hotel or at a friend's house or wherever you may be. So you go in, you select the wireless, you enter the wireless password, and you join the network. In a hotel, this can be a little more complicated because you may have to go through their little portal where you put in your room, hotel room number and your name and so forth. But generally, this is the way that it will work. You connect, you'll see it shows success, and you are now connected. This device is connected wirelessly to the internet, and it has the VPN connection that goes back to your Raspberry Pi at home. So you go to the Wireguard client here and connect. You only have to do this the first time. It'll default to this setting. Each time after that, you'll see, give it a second here, and it shows that it's connected. So anything attached to this wireless ID, which appears to be the same one at home, will actually travel over the internet through a secure tunnel into your home and back out from there. So Roku, like if you're watching Hulu Live or something like that, it will think you're actually at home. Notice this, my network and the Wi-Fi key, those need to be the same as your home network, both the key and the password. Every time you go to a new location, you need to connect to the Wi-Fi at that location. So you do that by going to the Internet tab. You scan for networks. You select the network at the location, and you put in the password. You have to do this at each new location. This is what attaches the router to the wireless in that location. As long as it connects, you should be good to go. Success. It's very important that you remove users and devices if they're no longer being used. Remember, these have full unfettered access to your home network. So you do this using the Pi VPN -R command. And it gives you a list of them. You type in the name, in this case it's test client, and it revokes the certificate for that particular device. This step is optional, but I recommend you set up a task that will reboot the machine once a month. This is so that if any security updates come along, they'll get applied. You do this very easily. You start out by editing a file called etc cron tab. See that nano etc cron tab? You go down and you add a line as you see here. This line, it says 2244 ***. That means at 22 minutes after 4 o'clock on the 4th day of every month, as root, run sbin reboot. Then when you do a Control X to exit, you just save the file. If you wish to use Openvpn, the setup is very similar. You just need 2 extra steps. You got to create a password when you add the user, and you've got to edit the file. So if you set it up using Openvpn, you do the same step, Pi VPN add, accept the default for the certificate value, and you enter a password for that particular client. You do that and confirm the password, and it actually creates the file for you. Then you go through the same steps to copy the file down, just as you did before. But the main difference is that you need to add a line in the second line here. After client, you need to add ask pass. This is required so that the GL.INET will actually ask you for that password when you create the client in the GL.INET. So you do that, you go to your GL.INET, you go down to VPN, you go to, in this case, Openvpn Client, go to Management, you add a new VPN certificate, drag and drop it on there. You'll see it asks you for the description, and it also asks you for the passphrase. That passphrase is the same passphrase that you put in previously. Otherwise, it behaves exactly the same. You see test client is now among your list there. You can make changes to it if you need to. Go to status, you can select that test client and connect. It's exactly the same as in the Wireguard client. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. These really are neat little devices, very inexpensive, and do a great job. If you have any questions, please like, subscribe, leave me a comment down below. It really helps the channel when you do that. I'll do my best to answer. Thanks.